I'm not new to Shenandoah, but I'm not exactly a local either. I'd hiked Old Rag twice before and knew the route well enough to feel confident going alone on a weekday in late October. I wanted to catch the leaves before the first frost dulled the color. I bought a day-use pass online, printed it, and left it on the dash. I parked at the Old Rag lot a little after 9, shouldered my small pack, 2 liters of water, a rain shell, first aid kit, a snack, and a paper map, and told myself I'd be off the ridge before the fog rolled in that afternoon, like the forecast warned. The bulletin at the kiosk mentioned slick rock and poor visibility after 1. My plan was simple: up the ridge trail, down the saddle trail, then along Weekly Hollow Fire Road back to the car. Nothing special. I just wanted a steady climb, a careful scramble, and a quiet walk out. The trail was busy at the start. College kids from Charlottesville, a couple in matching jackets, a dad and his teenage son talking about the rock scramble like it was a rite of passage. We leapfrogged one another on the lower switchbacks until the slope steepened and the chatter spread thin. That's when I first saw him, about 20 feet off the trail, standing still under the mountain laurel. He wore a faded orange beanie, a dark green jacket, and had his hands shoved in his pockets. He didn't look at the view or the ground or even the blazes. He just stared through the line of hikers and didn't move aside. No pack. I gave a quick morning, out of habit when I passed. Nothing back. I stayed on the blue blazes and tried to let it go. People hike for all kinds of reasons. Some like quiet, some don't talk. I stopped at a low quartz outcrop to re-tee my right boot and take a drink. I set my pack down against a rock. When I picked it up, the sternum strap had been threaded through the haul loop in a way I never do. The plastic buckle had a faint gray film on it, like residue from tape. I didn't want to overthink it, so I filed it away as a weird detail and kept going. In a damp stretch where the trail ducked under brush, I noticed footprints. Most were the usual oval treads, but one set stood out. The right heel had a half-moon chunk missing. Once I saw it, I started spotting it everywhere, on switchbacks, shortcuts, and soft dirt turns. I didn't stop to study them, but I started noting landmarks in my head. Stone staircase at 10 and 20. First squeeze at 10 and 50. I passed the college pair again near a tilted rock slab. When I glanced back, the man in the beanie had appeared again, keeping an easy distance, never close enough to talk, never far enough to lose sight. The ridge got quieter after the first real scramble. Most casual hikers had turned back. The usual landmarks came fast. The steel handhold, the narrow chimney you climb facing in, the wide granite stretch everyone calls the whaleback. The wind brushed across wet rock and made my shoes chirp. Each time I paused to catch my breath, he showed up again. Still no pack. Still calm. Still watching. I tried a small test. I stepped aside at a pullout and asked, "You all good?" He didn't answer. He stopped 3 body lengths away, standing just enough to block the downhill. It wasn't confusion about who had the right of way. It was a statement: I'm here, and I'm not moving. By 12:40, the fog rolled in from the west exactly as predicted. 1 minute there was a horizon, the next, nothing but gray. Visibility dropped to about 30 yards. The last voices I'd heard were far below. I crossed a wet boulder field to open some distance. Stupid in that weather, but I moved slow and careful. A minute later, I saw his same boot print in the thin smear of mud I'd stepped on barely 90 seconds earlier. That was enough. I didn't want to go wandering off the ridge or start something by confronting him. So I did the smart, boring thing. I called park dispatch. I didn't bother with coordinates. I just described what I could see: blue blazes near the steel handhold, chimney behind me, whaleback ahead, visibility 30 yards, solo male in a faded orange beanie and green jacket, no pack, matching my movements. The dispatcher's voice was steady. She told me to keep moving toward the Saddle Trail junction and narrate what I saw so they could track my progress. A ranger team was heading up from Bird's Nest Shelter. If I reached the junction post first, I was to stay there and not wander into the fog. Talking to no one felt strange, but it helped keep me focused. I described everything out loud: stone staircase with a crack on the right riser, shallow pool in a granite bowl, puddles on flat rock. Every time I paused, he paused, always keeping me between him and the downhill, not posturing, just controlling distance. I kept repeating what I saw for dispatch. No pack, half moon heel missing, matty jacket, no visible emblem. The dispatcher asked if he'd spoken. I said no. She said the team was close and to stay put if I saw the junction post. When it finally appeared, just a wooden stake through the fog, I crossed the slab slow and set my hand on it. I told dispatch I was there. That's when he took a step closer than he had all day. His jaw shifted like he was grinding his teeth. I raised my voice and said, "I'm on the phone with dispatch. Rangers are above and below. I'm staying right here." He tilted his head but didn't back off. Moved to my right. I turned with him, keeping the open rock to my left. Then I heard boots. 2 figures emerging from the fog fast. Green uniforms, ball caps, one calling my name. I raised my left hand and kept my right on the post. The man turned like he meant to slip down the ramp toward the saddle trail, but a 3rd ranger came up from below and cut him off. They told him to show his hands. He hesitated, then did. Everything after that happened cleanly. They patted him down and pulled out zip ties, duct tape with a dirty edge, nitrile gloves, and a folded paper with my license plate number written across the top. Beneath it were other partial plates and notes. One ranger asked if anyone had touched my pack. I told him about the strap and the residue. He bagged it for prints without saying much. They set the man between them and we all started down the trail. The fog thickened in spots, thinned in others. The granite was slick. I followed the rear ranger and did exactly what he said. Hands where he could see them, eyes on the tread. At Bird's Nest Shelter, they stopped to radio in an update. The man stayed quiet, only talking to the rangers. At the weekly Hollow Fire Road junction, a Madison County deputy waited with a marked truck. They separated us, took my statement, and photographed my pack. 2 hikers who'd seen us earlier came by and told the deputy they'd spotted a man with no pack watching people near the handhold section. The deputy compared my notes and logged the items taken from him. At the lot, I sat on the bumper of the ranger truck while they wrapped up their reports. I stared at my car, then at the tree line, just needing something to focus on. The ranger who'd walked behind me said there were active warrants out of 2 states for a man stalking weekday hikers near Skyline Drive. He didn't share details, only that my call and steady narration helped them intercept fast. He asked me to save my call log and write down my times that night while they were fresh. A week later, an officer called. The man had been booked on those warrants. New charges were pending. The gear he carried matched other incidents, and my notes helped confirm the timeline. The officer thanked me for calling early instead of trying to handle it myself. Since then, I've made a few changes. I carry a small mirror now and check under my car before I get in. Not because I expect trouble, but because it's easy. I don't hike alone on foggy weekdays anymore. I still climb Old Rag, but only on clear days with other people around. I still carry my map, headlamp, and small kit. I still step aside for others. What stays with me is how normal that day looked. The bright beanie, the same blue blazes I've followed before. A quiet Tuesday, steady climb, nothing unusual. The ridge didn't do anything strange. The fog came, the rocks were slick, the air felt like it always does when clouds sit on the mountains. Nothing supernatural happened. Just one person using the quiet for the wrong reason, and that was enough. He was arrested. The pattern stopped. My habits changed. That's it. I think about the junction post a lot. It's not much to look at, but in the fog with my hand on it, it felt solid. I didn't have to be clever. I didn't need to figure anything out. I just had to stand where people would be, say what I saw, and wait for the shapes to come out of the gray. Now, when I pull into that lot, I sit for a moment, check the brush line, glance at the mirror, and remind myself, follow the route, respect the weather, speak up early. The rest is just noise. I grew up visiting Great Smoky Mountains National Park with my family. The kind of trips where you take pictures by the old churches and drive the loop road at sunset looking for deer. Cades Cove always felt safe to me. Paved, open, familiar. My cousin felt the same. We knew the park rules by heart. Hang your food, keep a clean site, respect quiet hours. We weren't rookies when we booked a late-season campsite in mid-November. We knew the cold would thin the crowds and quiet the woods. The bears would be tucked away. Half the campsites would be empty. We drove in on Laurel Creek Road, checked in at the little station, and listened to the host give the same speech I'd heard since I was a kid. Firewood from here, not from home. Use the bare cables. Quiet hours mean quiet. That was fine by us. We came for that kind of silence. We set up fast. The air was sharp, and the smell of fallen leaves lingered in the cold. Our site was a short walk from the loop road, far enough from the bathrooms to feel private. About 30 yards into the trees, a massive blowdown marked the edge of the woods where the campsites gave way to open field. We pitched a small dome tent, stacked a pile of wood, and hung our food on the cable as soon as dinner was done. We even reviewed our safe word like we do before hikes. Say it once. Wait for the other person to repeat it. It sounds silly until you actually need it. The plan was simple: sit by the fire and relax. The mistake was thinking the quiet would stay familiar. It started with footsteps just outside the firelight. Slow, careful, like someone moving through the dark without wanting to trip. Not fast, not heavy. I've heard deer before, light and clumsy when they spook. This wasn't that. The steps were too even, too deliberate. They circled us, a slow, deliberate oval around the fire, each pass coming a little closer. We couldn't see anything past the tree line, just black trunks and silence. After a few minutes, the sound drifted off, and the night settled again. We kept the fire going. Cold seeps in faster when the coals die. We told ourselves it was probably a stray dog, or maybe a coyote testing the edge of camp. It was easier to say that than admit what we both felt, that something was out there, moving with purpose. Sometime close to midnight, we heard a long, thin creak. Not the snap of a branch, but the sound of weight pressing down and easing up, like something was testing the wood without breaking it. We grabbed our headlamps and swept the beam toward the blowdown. 2 eyes reflected back, not green like a raccoon's, not red like a deer's. These were white and clear, and too far apart. For a second, they hovered above the log, then dipped below it in one smooth motion, like something sliding into cover. We didn't speak. We just turned off the lamps and listened. The pacing started again, tighter this time. We let the fire die down to coals. Bright flames make it harder to see what's beyond them. We set the iron grate across the pit and lowered the logs so they wouldn't spark. Then we went inside the tent and zipped it closed in one practiced motion. The air horn sat between us where both of us could reach it. My camp knife rested across my knee. We didn't talk. It wasn't fear yet. It was instinct. Talking felt like tossing a rope into the dark, and I didn't want anything pulling on it. The wind had died. The tent walls were still. The only sound was our breathing. Then, after what felt like forever, came the faint metallic tick of the zipper slider flexing inward. If you've camped in a dome tent, you know the sound of a zipper moving. This wasn't that. This was the slider being pushed from the outside, slow, patient, deliberate. Half an inch, stop. Half an inch, stop. I held the air horn in one hand, the knife in the other, and leaned close enough to feel the nylon chill against my face. I said our safe word, clear and calm. The word came back to us from the other side of the tent, in a voice that sounded like my aunt if she had a sore throat. Same word, same rhythm, same tone. Then it said my cousin's full name. First, middle, and last. We hadn't said that name all day, not even that week. Hearing it come from the dark without a single step, breath, or shadow to carry it, my body just locked. The zipper ticked again. Twice. I imagined something thin, like a hook or a nail, working the teeth apart a little at a time. The voice kept trying names like it was testing keys on a lock. I didn't blast the horn right away. Inside a tent, that sound will destroy your hearing. We waited. When the next tug came, my cousin shouted the safe word, and I hit the horn. The blast ripped the air apart. The tent walls shook. Outside, the steps changed, breaking into a fast, uneven rush toward the blowdown. Then silence. We didn't chase. We didn't unzip. We sat with our backs pressed together and stayed that way until the gray light of dawn softened the tent walls. When we finally stepped outside, we treated camp like a crime scene. The zipper had 3 small scratches above the slider, bright marks where something had pried at the teeth. We followed the trail toward the blowdown and found the source of the branch noises. Whatever had moved around us had crossed over fallen limbs without breaking them, testing its weight before stepping off. 30 yards out, half buried in leaves, we found a buck. Dead? Not torn apart, just hidden. Its front legs were folded backward in a way that didn't make sense. Unnatural, wrong. There wasn't much blood. The body was whole, the head still attached, just covered lightly in leaves like someone had been saving it. We searched for tracks. Nothing clear, just shallow impressions spaced too far apart, like something big had tried to step lightly. We took photos, dropped a GPS pin, packed up, and drove the loop road until we flagged down a ranger. You learn a lot from how a ranger talks when he's worried. Short sentences, careful words. He followed us to the carcass, looked at the legs, lifted the leaves with a stick, like he was opening a door he wasn't sure about. Then he crouched by our tent, ran a finger over the zipper marks, and gave us a look like he wanted to see if we'd say it first. He didn't name what we'd seen, He just radioed wildlife control, told us to pack up and stay ready to check out. A volunteer host came by on a golf cart, spoke quietly to a few nearby campers, and suggested they move closer to the entrance. No panic, no alarms, just quiet concern. At the entrance, a wildlife tech met us. He asked good questions: where we stored our food, how high the bag was, what time we heard the zipper, if we'd used scented wipes, if anyone nearby had a dog. He looked at our photos, then at the scratches on the zipper, and nodded like it wasn't the first time he'd seen it. He handed us a printed half-sheet about unidentified scavenger behavior and seasonal activity. No species listed, none needed. He took our names, said someone might follow up, and left it at that. We didn't ask for stories. We didn't go back with a camera. We didn't leave bait or set up traps. We just packed up and drove home. A few days later, the park posted a small notice online and on the bulletin board near the Loop Road. It said there'd been animal activity near the campground. Some loops would close early after dark. Campers should secure food and report unusual behavior. No mention of species, no details. You could read it and think raccoons. You could read it and think bears. But if you've ever heard your own name whispered from the other side of a tent, you can read between the lines. A week later, a hiker we'd met on our way out sent us a photo. Same buck, same GPS tag. The carcass had been dragged closer to the field. The legs were still twisted wrong. He said it smelled sweet and sour for a second. Then the smell vanished, like something pulled it away. He didn't hear a sound, just left. I believed him. People say it could have been a bear or coyotes moving the body. Maybe. But they don't do it like that. They don't test zippers like locks. They don't make the woods hold its breath. We gave the park our photos and coordinates. That was the end of our part. People want stories like this to go further, but I'm not going to make one up for you. We didn't turn it into an investigation. We didn't hunt for proof. We did what most people do after brushing up against something old and patient. We went home. We watched for the quiet notice that said someone official took it seriously. That was enough. If you camp late in the season at Cades Cove, follow the rules like your life depends on them. Keep your food up. Keep your site clean. Know a safe word. And don't relax just because you hear it repeated in a voice you think you know. Don't trust names in the dark. Don't trust a zipper that moves an inch at a time. If you wake up to the sound of branches bending and footsteps that move slow and wide, remember, you're not the only one who chose that night for the quiet. Make noise when you have to. Stay boring. Leave when daylight gives you the chance. And if you ever find a buck half buried with its legs bent wrong and no clear tracks around it, don't go looking for the story you think you want. The story's already over. The park will post its notice. The loops will close early. Your photos will end up in a folder with a neutral label, and you'll keep your ears sharp for the next time you need them, because the voice outside your tent knew your middle name before you ever spoke it. That's your warning. That's enough. I rented a one-room cabin on the west shore of Burnside Lake to fish for walleye in late September and get a few quiet nights away from work. I'm not local. I drove up from out of state with a simple plan: fish mornings and evenings, nap during the day, clean what I caught, and stay out of trouble. The cabin sat off a spur on Van Vack Road, about 15 minutes from Highway 169. It had a short dock, a metal fish cleaning table, a small rowboat with an old outboard, and a bait bucket tied to a rope. Across a narrow cove, an old resort looked long abandoned. Cabins locked, docks stacked onshore, weeds filling the gravel paths. I bought groceries at Zupp's Market, had a late breakfast at Britain's Cafe, and kept to myself. The cabin had a laminated lake map showing Burnside Lodge, the North Arm, and the Boundary Waters line. I was outside the permit zone and didn't plan to cross it. I wasn't looking for anything strange. I just wanted fish and sleep. That first evening, I jigged along a sand shelf that curved out from a rocky point. The air had that sharp, clean smell you get near tamarack and cold water in early fall. I caught one keeper walleye, put it on a stringer, and paddled back before full dark. While I was tying the boat, I noticed a blue light moving along the far bank. It stayed level, chest high, like someone walking with a lantern. But it didn't bob or reflect on the water. I stood on my dock and watched it follow the shoreline. It stopped directly across from me, far enough that I couldn't make out anything behind it. I called out, "We're full," the way you talk to a stray dog so it doesn't come closer. A single word came back, full. Same tone, same timing. I shut the door and locked it. Told myself it was just sound bouncing off the water, even though the echo didn't line up. Morning felt normal until I noticed the sand near the ladder. Long, narrow prints ran through it, like oversized dog tracks, except each one had a fifth mark behind the heel, like a second step pressed in. The stride matched mine. The trail began at the wet sand, crossed my smooth patch, and ended on dry rock with no marks past it. On the dock, 4 fish heads sat in a neat row, all facing the cabin. They weren't from my catch. The cuts weren't ragged like a turtle's bite, and not clean like a knife either. Thin ovals of oil stained the wood between each head. I used a fillet glove to pick them up, tossed them in a trash bag, then scrubbed and bleached the boards. After that, I changed my setup, dumped bait water up the path instead of at the shore, tied the cooler higher on the wall hook, brought the fuel can and anchor inside, and smoothed the sand again. It felt like overkill, but I wanted to know if anything came through while I was gone. I spent the day fishing and caught a few smallmouths I released and another wally. As I came back at dusk, the blue light appeared again. Same pace, same height, still no reflection on the water. I ate dinner, cleaned up, then sat on the porch with a chair to watch. After 10 minutes, the light stopped across from my dock. Then a voice called out my mother's name. My accent, my rhythm, exactly how I would say it. I froze. Then the voice changed. It was a man's voice I recognized from an old news clip I'd watched at lunch, a story about the resort closing. The way he said his last name stuck with me, and the sound that reached me matched it. I grabbed my mag light and aimed it along the shoreline. At the edge of the water, a coyote stood upright just long enough to make eye contact. Its elbows bent inward at strange angles, and the head sat too high on the body. Then it dropped to all fours and slipped into the tamarack. The blue light didn't move. I didn't leave that night. I hate driving forest roads after dark. I braced the door with a chair, set a pan on the knob so it would fall if anyone turned it, and slept with my boots unlaced and the flashlight and knife within reach. Around 2 a.m., I woke to slow, steady steps along the shoreline. Wet sand to rock, rock to wet sand, back and forth. No banging on the door, no scratching at the windows. Just patience. I lay still and waited until it faded. At first light, I drove into Eerie and stopped by City Hall in the sitting Louis County Recorder's office to check public records on the old resort. On paper, it still had an owner, a woman in her 70s, and a listed number for her son. He agreed to meet around noon at the chained-off boat launch across the cove. He was already there when I arrived, a new padlock on the chain between the posts. He didn't waste words. We walked past the shuttered cabins, docks stacked on shore, weeds pushing through the gravel. He pointed to rusted bait buckets and said people used to dump minnows and scraps by the water, which drew raccoons, coyotes, and things that learned to expect it. We stopped behind the lodge at a boarded-up cellar. The wood was clawed, splintered outward. He said animal control had come twice in recent years, but never found anything to file a report on. He lowered his voice and said people around here used a word not native to the region, skinwalker. Something that learns voices and goes after people staying alone. He didn't care what it was called, just that the shoreline stayed quiet. I asked about the new chain. He said they welded it this summer after some teens tried chumming the shallows for dares and videos. Once the water warms, he said, things cross over when people bait. He showed me boxes of motion lights he was installing around the lodge and launch to break up the dark. He wasn't trying to scare me. He just told me I should leave early or bring a friend next time. I said I'd head out in the morning. He nodded and wished me a safe drive. Back at my cabin, I packed most of my gear before sunset and only left out what I needed overnight. I wiped down surfaces, bleached the fish table again, coiled the dock rope so it couldn't snag, and set the key in the porch lockbox for an easy exit. I drained the bait water up the path where it couldn't run to the lake, ate a quick dinner, turned off all but one lamp, and lay down in my clothes. A little after 2 a.m., I heard those same steps, wet to dry, dry to wet. My mother's name came again, this time from the water, in my exact voice and tone, like I was calling her from another room. I stayed silent. Then the man's voice from the clip repeated a line from that same news story. The door didn't move. The windows stayed still. The steps passed 3 or 4 times. Then my own voice said, "We're full." After that, only the sound of water against the rocks. At dawn, I loaded the truck in 10 minutes. The sand showed the same long, narrow prints with that extra mark behind each heel. The fish heads were gone. I left the key in the box and drove south. My hands only stopped shaking once I hit the bigger highway. Somewhere near Tower, I got a voicemail from the cabin's number. It was my voice saying those same 2 words. I deleted it and blocked the call. Later that afternoon, I emailed the owner's contact to say I'd checked out early, left the key, and cleaned up. The owner's son replied that evening. He said the motion lights were up, the chain re-welded, and new "no bait dumping" signs posted. He didn't share any stories, and I didn't ask. He ended by saying that once the first hard frost hits, the shoreline usually goes quiet. I read that twice and finally started to feel normal again. I decided I was done with solo lake cabins for a while. Next time I come up to the Iron Range, I'll stay closer to town, fish during the day, clean at a public station, and pack out every scrap. I don't need more proof than I already have. In the weeks after, it wasn't the blue light or the upright coyote that stuck with me. It was the smaller things. The 5th mark behind each track, the way the fish heads lined up, all facing the cabin. The voices that used names with the right rhythm, testing where to put the weight in a sentence. None of it felt random. It felt practiced, like steps that had worked before and would keep working as long as people kept feeding the shore and answering back. You can call it whatever you want, skinwalker or something else, but the rule is the same. Stop giving it attention, stop standing at the water's edge, and don't lend it your voice. Winter came early that year. Near Thanksgiving, the owner's son emailed again, said everything had gone quiet after the first real freeze. That matched what he'd said before. No more messages, no more signs. Just silence, the kind lakes settle into when the temperature stays low. I don't think about the blue light much anymore. When I do, I remember how I said that one line to keep a stray back, and heard it returned with my own vowels. That was enough for me. I still fish. I just don't go alone, and I keep my night's simple lights on, gear clean, no bait near shore, and no talking to anything that isn't standing on 2 feet on my side of the lake. I live about an hour from Hocking Hills. When work piles up, I drive down, hike a loop, and head back. I'm not a guide or anything, just familiar enough with the main trails that I don't need a map. Late October is my favorite time to go. The air is cold in the gorge, the leaves are peaking, and the light hits the stone just right. That afternoon I parked at the Old Man's Cave Visitor Center around 3:30. I filled my bottle, glanced at the usual warning signs about cliffs, and started the Grandma Gatewood Buckeye Loop toward Cedar Falls. My pack was light, just a puffy, headlamp, first aid kit, battery pack with a short USB-C cable, whistle, and my knife in a front sheath. The plan was simple: 2 or 3 hours out, dinner in Logan. The weather looked nice but wasn't. Rain had come through overnight, leaving the stones slick and the leaves soak. The air in the gorge hung damp and service was spotty. I passed the usual spots: Upper Falls, Devil's Bathtub, the CCC Stonework, Hemlock Bridge. There were still families and couples around, but it was thinning out. I checked my watch, maybe 90 minutes of good light left. That's when I saw her. She was standing in the middle of the bridge, hands on the rail, facing the rock wall instead of the water. Pale blue hoodie, black leggings, trail runners. Hair tied up. No pack, no bottle, no phone I could see. At first I figured she was waiting for someone to take her picture or just thinking. When I got close enough to pass, she turned toward me without moving her feet. Her first words were practical. "Do you have a charger? My phone's about to die and I'm terrible with directions." I did. I handed her my small battery pack with the short cord attached. She plugged in, slipped the pack into her hoodie pocket, and said, "Can you walk me back to the lot? I keep taking wrong turns." It wasn't a big deal. I was heading that way anyway. We walked toward the next signpost. I expected her to take the main route back, but she pointed to a narrow spur that dropped deeper into the gorge. "Shortcut," she said. It didn't feel right, but I let it go. As we walked, I noticed small things I tried to ignore. I was sweating lightly, she wasn't. Her breathing never changed. The wet leaves muffled sound, but I could still hear my own steps, not hers. Trail runners can be quiet, I told myself. She asked what I drove, said she'd look for it in the lot. Then she mentioned how the visitor center monitors showed recent Instagram posts. Some even had the parking area in view. Her tone stayed flat, but her questions were oddly specific. When other hikers appeared, she slowed. When they were gone, she sped up. She stayed just behind my right shoulder, close enough to see my straps and zippers. Twice, she reached for the battery like she was about to hand it back, but didn't. The cable stayed looped around her hand. We reached a sandstone overhang, one of those shallow recesses where people hide from rain. The air underneath felt colder. It was almost 5. I should have already turned toward the lot. "I need my charger back," I said, holding out my hand. She tilted her head. "You can get it from my car," she said with a small smile that didn't touch her eyes. I felt a tug on my shoulder strap. She'd threaded the short cable through one of the loops on my pack while we walked, turning it into a leash. She gave it a sharp pull, testing my reaction. It would have looked like an accident if someone had walked up. 2 people tangled in a cord. I drew my knife and sliced the cable. The battery dropped into the wet leaves. She didn't flinch, just pulled the loose cord and watched me step back. I raised my voice and said I was heading back to the main trail. "Stay on trail," she said, same flat tone. It could have sounded helpful if it didn't feel rehearsed. I called out, "Hello," toward the brighter path ahead. My voice came back wrong, flat, swallowed by the gorge. I walked fast but steady, checking my gear as I went. Phone, wallet, knife, gone. The sheath held a folded paper instead. I pulled it out, a hardware store receipt from my town, time stamped that morning. My last 4 card digits were printed at the bottom. I hadn't bought anything that day. The receipt had been slipped into my sheath sometime since I left the visitor center. The only moments she'd been that close were when she adjusted the cable. I followed the signs toward Old Man's Cave, looking for the path with the most boot marks and open space. Voices started to carry again. I heard a dog bark and saw a couple up ahead. I asked if I could walk with them to the lot. They said yes right away. The woman mentioned they'd heard faint singing earlier near Upper Falls. A few notes repeated over and over. When we reached the visitor center, I went straight to a Ranger truck and told them everything: the charger, the detour, the cable, the overhang, the smile, the planted receipt, the missing knife. They took it seriously, bagged the cable and receipt, photographed my strap and hands. When I called my bank, they said there had been a small gas purchase in Logan that afternoon using my card. Different zip code, same last 4 digits. They froze the account. One ranger said I wasn't the first to report it. A woman, around dusk. She always asks for something that forces closeness: a charger, a sip of water, help reading a map. Then she leads people down quieter trails. No shouting, no weapons, just a subtle shift in space. He explained how the gorge kills echoes, how high sounds vanish and the leaf mat hides footsteps. Another hiker had found his camera strap woven through his own pack without noticing. Same hoodie color, same time of day. They patrolled the lots while I gave a statement to a deputy. On the drive home, I cracked the windows so the car wouldn't feel so still. When I unpacked, everything looked normal except for that folded receipt. 2 days later, a deputy called. They'd stopped a sedan off US 33 after a clerk reported card declines. The driver matched the description. In her card, a folded pale blue hoodie, trail runners with sandstone dust, a pile of power banks and short cables, knives, zip ties, athletic tape, a cheap radio tuned to a local channel, and a folder of printed Instagram posts from the Hocking Hills tag, photos with circles around parked cars and notes like "Red Subaru" or "Blue Civic." They also found a park map marked with pencil dots at tight, low traffic spots: Hemlock Bridge, Devil's Bathtub, Cedar Falls. My card data had been skimmed at a local gas pump. When they asked me to identify my things, I recognized my scratched battery pack and later, my knife. The case went forward on fraud and restraint charges. The park banned her pending trial. Later, the same ranger called and gave simple advice: don't post photos until you're home. Turn off geo tags. Never hand over something that becomes a tether, a strap, a short cord. If you feel boxed in, stop, let them pass, or join a group. And use a whistle instead of shouting. It carries better in the gorge. It wasn't dramatic, just solid advice. A month later, I went back with a friend. Midday, we crossed Hemlock Bridge and I touched the rail where it happened. Kids were laughing, water rushing, everything normal. That night, I wrote this up and posted it on a hiking forum. Just the facts and what I learned. It spread fast. A ranger account commented, "Don't hand strangers tethers." That line stuck. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't a hero. I was lucky enough to step out before it got worse. The things that stay with me are the receipt in the sheath and that tug on the strap. Proof of how close someone can get when you're in a place you trust. I still hike alone, but I've changed a few habits. Longer breakaway cord. knife in a zip pocket, no auto-geo-tagging. Posts go up after I'm home. I cross bridges in daylight when I can, and I keep the evidence sticker on that battery pack. It's not a trophy. It's a reminder. When I feel that old reflex to be helpful, I think about that short cord threaded through my own gear and how easy it was to accept it. That's enough to make me slow down and choose better. I still hike Hocking Hills. I just give it the respect it asks for. I don't look for monsters, I look for tactics. And when I cross Hemlock Bridge now, I look at the water like everyone else, then down at my straps, and keep walking. I've been to Whittaker Point before, but never at night. My partner and I pick a weekday in early November, hoping the cold keeps the trails empty. We want the overlook to ourselves in the morning. On the drive through Boxley Valley, we stop to watch elk move through the mist before heading up Cave Mountain Road. The air gets sharper with every turn. At a small store near Low Gap, a cashier laughs about the night wind and tells us not to camp under the overhangs after the first frost. I buy a lighter I don't need and brush it off as local talk. At the trailhead, frost glitters on an empty truck with a dog crate in the back. Before heading out, we repeat our old rule. If anything strange happens after dark, we don't argue, we don't pack, we just follow a straight line down to the road. We call it the straight line rule. The first stretch feels normal. Leaves slide under our boots, and a cold stone scent rises from the bluff. We find a small clearing behind bare oaks and set up camp, a 2-person tent, a stove, and our trekking poles laid neatly by the door. No cell service. Just the sound of the wind moving in steady bursts, like something counting time. As water heats, a short cough echoes from the woods. Not a person, not an animal, just one wet sound that fades too quickly. I tell myself it's a deer. We eat, hang our food low, and talk through our plan again. The wind hits in a rhythm, and I start working between the gusts without thinking about it. Before we zip in for the night, I notice faint muddy prints on a rock near the path. Barefoot, 5 toes, probably someone hiking earlier, I tell myself. Inside the tent, the nylon hums in the wind. Then that same cough comes again, closer this time. We freeze, listening until the wind smooths it away. Sometime after midnight, I wake up to slow, wet breathing just outside the rainfly. It stays near the zipper, never moving around. The air feels damp and metallic, heavy in my mouth. A pressure pushes against the wall, like a flat hand pressing through the fabric, then pulls away. I whisper the plan. My partner whispers it back. Then my name comes from outside, almost in their voice, but not quite right, like a recording played a little too slow. A shadow rises on the tent wall, shoulders first, my height, then taller. The zipper twitches, testing. No footsteps, just the sound of wind shifting around us. Something taps twice against the fabric, and from somewhere farther off comes a dry, hard clack, like stone on stone. The breathing moves behind us. The sound is heavy but quiet, the weight not matching the noise. My partner's watch beeps the hour, and 2 beats later, the same beep repeats from the dark. We wait. It doesn't move again. Then the zipper pull shifts once more. I count down on my fingers. On go, we drive our trekking poles through the tent wall low to the ground. My pole hits something dense, not solid like a person, not soft like fabric. A sound comes back, half breath, half growl. The pressure vanishes. We rip the tent open, grab our headlamps, and run for the dark slope. Straight line, I say. My partner nods and slides first. The ground gives out fast, leaves carrying us downhill in silence. Something moves above us, fewer steps than we make. When we stop, it stops. I throw a rock uphill. It lands, rolls, and settles. 3 seconds later, a soft step sounds too close. I call out the name of a deputy I know, pretending we have service. From the dark, a voice answers in my partner's tone, repeating the name but bending it wrong. The air shifts, metallic again, mixed with the faint sweetness of rot. We keep moving, palms feeling for rock ledges as we drop into the drainage. Cold water catches our boots. We stay in it to mask our sound. Something paces along the rim, keeping up without effort. Once or twice, small stones click down from above, thrown, not fallen. Ahead, a dead cedar lies across the water, tangled with hanging moss that smells faintly of rust. We push past until our legs ache. Then from downstream, a voice says, "This way," in my voice, just off by a breath. My partner shakes their head. We stay silent. On a sandbar, we find a deer track beside 5 long toe marks, human-sized but stretched. The shape corrected like someone pressed too hard. We keep moving until the drainage squeezes into a culvert under Cave Mountain Road. We crawl through on hands and knees and come out on the gravel. Frost sparkles in our headlamp beams. Bare footprints lead away along the shoulder. Long toes spread wide, heels split. We don't follow. We walk fast to the car, lock the doors twice without meaning to, and drive toward Kingston with the hazards ticking in rhythm. We park under a streetlight and sit upright, pack still on our laps. Every passing truck wakes us. At sunrise, we call the sheriff from the payphone by the store. A deputy meets us at the trailhead with a Forest Service tech. They walk us back to the site. Our tent sits exactly as we left it, door unzipped neatly, no rips, no mess. The lantern's dead. The stove's cold. On my partner's hat sits a deer jawbone, clean white except for a faint pink at the joint. A smooth drag mark circles the tent once, then stops at the edge of a boulder, ending in open air. No boot prints, just long, bare ones with strange toe marks. The deputy measures one stride but doesn't say the number. The tech takes photos, says the area will close for resource protection. On the way out, new orange flags hang low along the trail. One strip has tiny bite marks, neat and close together. Back at the lot, the other truck is gone. A brown smear crosses its tailgate like a handprint. We drive to Ponca for breakfast, but barely touch our food. A local guide I know asks what happened. I tell him the short version. He just nods and says not to argue with the season. That after the first frost, the wind brings old traffic along the ridge. He says to keep metal close, keep our voices low, and carry salt. We laugh it off, but it fits what happened. A week later, we hike back in daylight. The trail is busier than I expect. New signs warn not to camp near the overlook. Everything feels normal, until the wind crosses the ridge and I taste that faint metallic tang again. My partner and I don't mention it. At home, we clean our gear. The knit hat goes in the trash. The smell never leaves. We don't keep photos or reminders. We change how we hike now. We always pack salt. We keep our exits clear. I carry a small card with new rules: follow the straight line. Run water when possible. Ignore mimic voices. No hesitation. Go. It sits next to my ID. At night, I set my trekking poles by the door and touch the metal tips before turning off the light. I don't tell people to avoid Whittaker Point. I just tell them what we heard and how we left, and to trust the moment their gut goes still. If something calls your name from the wrong side of a zipper, don't answer. Move toward the water, and don't look back. We still hike that ridge sometimes, but only in daylight, never after shadows start to stretch. Some routes don't sleep through winter, and some things still learn our voices on the wind.